What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, I'm going to show you my new FPL draft. We are 8 days away from the Game Week 1 deadline. I'm going to show you how the team is shaping up, plus a couple of variations that I'm considering as well. Don't forget, you can check how your current draft is looking over on the My Team tool on Fantasy Football Hub. You can get it rated for free using the links in the description below. And just to show you how easy it is, I'm on my phone on the app, and all I have to do is go on Import Team from Screenshot, choose one from my photo library and click done, and then it should load it in a matter of seconds. It's as simple as that. I just click on save and then go to optimize to make sure that the correct teams are in the 11, and then it gives me a rating of 94% for that current draft. If you want to check yours for free, links in the description below. So let's start with the defensive picks. I've still got the Brentford goalkeeper combination of Flekken at 4.5 and Valdemarson at 4 million. 4.5 is ideally the most I want to spend on my main keeper. If I end up going for someone else, it'd probably be Pickford at 5 or Raya at 5.5, but right now it's Flekken. If I can convince myself that someone like Dean Henderson at Crystal Palace is not going to lose his place, I'd be very tempted to get him. But I just think with Sam Johnson as a backup, there is a chance if you make a bunch of mistakes, they could swap goalkeepers. And Sam Johnson was number one for a large period of last season. And obviously Flekken could make mistakes too, but then I've got the backup keeper on the bench ready to go. So I feel like this approach that I'm on right now is the kind of safety first one. And long term, there's probably not a huge amount of difference between Flekken and Henderson anyway. If I end up wildcarding early, then it probably is a mistake to start with Flekken, but that's not a guarantee. So that's where I'm at right now. In terms of the premium defenders, Trent Alexander-Arnold is back in the team. He has been in the majority of the drafts that I've put together. He wasn't in the last one, but if I can get the money together to own him, that is something that I really want to do with the fixtures that Liverpool have got. I know some people are concerned about how Arne Slot will have them playing, whether they'll be as defensively solid. You know, there'll be this drop-off without Klopp, etc. The fixtures are enough for me to go for it, especially knowing how good that Liverpool team can be and how attacking Trent is as well. It's also worth noting there is still pre-season friendlies before the season starts. So, and obviously press conferences as well. So if there's any doubts about Trent starting in Game Week 1, I'll just take him out of the team. But I just think he will play one way or another. He'll be right back in midfield, wherever it is. I just don't think he's the kind of player that would get left out. And someone made a really good point on my YouTube comments the other day when I mentioned that the clean sheets last year are much lower than the season before. That actually makes premium defenders more valuable because that's likely to be where the majority of the clean sheets come from anyway. You couple that with Trent's attacking returns and the fact he's cheaper now. I don't know, I've just got to start with him. It doesn't mean I have to keep him forever. The first 5, 6, 7 game weeks and then maybe drop him down to someone else is the current plan. I've also got Porro in my draft for the first time. Most of the previous teams I've played around with have had a £6 million defender. And I was against Porro because of the clean sheets, but a lot of people are talking about him now. And he's kind of reminding me during pre-season how attacking he can be. He's absolutely nailed on as well. And you save 0.5 million. And the reason that I've kind of okayed it with myself is because by dropping from a £6 million defender to a 5.5 in Porro, it lets me upgrade my 4 million defender on the bench to a 4.5. So if I really want to cover Porro's bad fixtures like Newcastle away in Game Week 3, Arsenal at home in Game Week 4, then I can. The reality is, because he's so attacking, I'd probably play him against Newcastle and maybe against Arsenal, but I've got a deeper bench by going for him instead of the 6 millions. I think in terms of those 6 million options, I'm still quite keen on Van Dijk. So it might be that I go for Van Dijk and Barco instead of Porro and Konza, which is what I'm out on right now. I also potentially like Gabriel at Arsenal. A squad's just come out at the time of recording with him in the first 11, as you might imagine. Calafiori and Timber not even in the squad. I'm pretty sure Gabriel's going to start the season. Longer term, there might be rotation and stuff like that. But I still don't like the opening fixtures for Arsenal. And unless I'm guaranteeing that I'm going to wildcard in Game Week 4, I just don't think I really want to go for an Arsenal defender. I think I'm just going to bet against it. And then it just leaves Vardiol. And I think with Man City and Man United players in particular, I'm going to wait and see what the lineups are on the Community Shield, how they play in terms of, is Vardiol still getting really far forward and basically being a left winger? If he is, he'll be straight back in. So that's the kind of things I'm thinking about. But right now I've got Porro, and instead of a 4 million Barco on the bench from Brighton, I've got Konza, who is a better player longer term anyway. So it just gives me a better bench. And I think it also it sets me up to not necessarily run into a bunch of issues straight away, and probably means I'm less likely to need to wildcard and make transfers early on by having that deeper squad. It might not work out like that, but that's the kind of thinking behind it. And then the other two defenders are Mykolenko, obviously from Everton, and Robinson from Fulham. They rotate quite nicely. And although Fulham's defence doesn't fill me with confidence, expected goals conceded last year were not great, he is very attacking and the fixtures are very good, especially with that rotation between the two. So defence looking pretty good. I really want Trent if I can. Let's take a look at the midfield. Okay, so before you rush to Twitter and the YouTube comments to slate my midfield, let me just explain my reasonings first of all. I'd also say that I'm recording this on the 7th of August. It's going out on the 8th, 8 days before the season starts. There's still a bunch of picks that I'm not completely sure about. And this close to the Game Week 1 deadline, that doesn't feel great. Usually I'm a lot more settled. I think it's partly due to the pricing. FPL have made it harder. But also Copa America, Euro 2024 players coming back late. It still feels like we're waiting for a bunch of info from managers in the last few pre-season friendlies. So even if I'm starting to get the structure a little bit better, the exact picks could still change, especially in midfield. So let's just quickly run through it. So Nkunku, I think, is going to be my first choice 6.5 million midfielder at this point. So if I've only got space for one 6.5, it's going to be Nkunku. There is worries about injuries and stuff like that. Obviously, we hardly saw him play at all last year for Chelsea. But if I'm not mistaken, he's the player in pre-season so far for Chelsea that's played the most minutes. He's coming through games. He's played 90 minutes a few times. Maresca keeps talking him up as well. He can play in different positions. He knows how good of a player he is. The goals and assists are going to come. And yes, Man City at home is not a good fixture. But after that, it gets really good for Chelsea. So I'm fairly settled, at least, on my favourite 6.5 million midfielder pick. I've said since day one, he's more than capable of outscoring that price point. And I just don't think I can go against that unless he picks up an injury in the next week or so. So he's definitely in, I think. Then I've got Son. First time he's made it into a draft. Simple case of, I've got a £10 million midfield slot. So that's Son or Saka. Saka we've not seen feature in a pre-season friendly yet, although he is in the squad for Arsenal's latest game at the time of recording. If it looks likely Saka is going to start in game week 1, he will be back in. If there's doubts around that, I'll probably just start with Son and then decide what to do later on. Because ultimately, Spurs' first couple of fixtures are nice anyway. Leicester away and Everton at home. And okay, Newcastle away, Arsenal at home, Brentford at home, next three are not as good. But that's more so for a defender, right? I think if Son's going to play against Newcastle away and Arsenal at home, it's not really the end of the world. I'd rather have Saka, but if there's doubts over his game time in game week 1, I probably won't go there. For what it's worth, I just think as long as Saka is able to get on the pitch, Arteta will start him, so I'll probably put him back in. But either way, I've got space for a 10 million midfielder. I'm probably not going to find 0.5 to get Palmer. I think Palmer's a great option. I just don't necessarily think he's miles better than Son or Saka, or worth finding 0.5 for. Third midfielder is Eze. I don't think I need to talk about him too much. He's been mentioned a lot. I think he's a great option at 7 million. If he's to transfer to someone else, let's say that Spurs or Man City or someone like that come in for him, straight away he becomes a worse option. He'd lose penalties, his game time wouldn't be as secure, so he'd have to leave the team. I'm not sure where I would go right now. If Tony was to leave Brentford, I'd maybe just put Mbeumo in because he'd be on penalties, but I'm not convinced Tony is going to leave. I'd probably go down to a 6.5 like Brennan Johnson or Garnacho, someone like that. Gibbs White maybe as well. I think he's a pretty solid option. But for now, Eze's in. I just think the fixtures they've got are decent enough. He takes penalties. He's nailed on. The minutes are good. I'm not worried about Elise. He's been in every single draft. So he's going nowhere unless it looks likely that Crystal Palace are going to sell him. Now for the two more controversial picks. So first of all, I've got Dwight McNeil, which when you say it out loud doesn't sound that exciting. He's in to rotate with one of my forwards. So similar to Mykolenko and Robinson, McNeil and Muniz rotate quite nicely. Most of the time I'm just going to play Muniz. But for game week 1, McNeil's in there for Brighton. But he's also a solid option to have on the bench in other weeks, just in case I need cover from somewhere. Or if I pick up an injury that's a short-term one, I don't want to get rid of that player, I can just play McNeil instead. Now, is he the best 5.5? That's up for debate, and I'm not sure about that right now. And because I've not had a 5.5 million midfielder in my drafts very much, I've not given it a huge amount of thought. I quite like Andreas Pereira because Fulham's fixtures are good and he's probably on penalties. But do I really want 2 Fulham attackers? Like, that would give me triple Fulham. Muniz, who I'll come on to in a minute, Andreas and Robinson. And it just doesn't feel right starting with triple Fulham for some reason. You've got Brereton Diaz at Southampton. Their fixtures are okay. He's now there. He's probably not going to take penalties. It'll be Armstrong instead. But Brereton Diaz, if I just have a quick look here, I think he got 6 goals last year in 1,000 minutes. So 6 goals, 1 assist. Not bad, I would say. It's not like he was playing in a Man City or a Liverpool or anything like that. So he could be an option as well. There's Mavidia at Leicester. There's options at 5.5. It doesn't have to be McNeil, but he does happen to rotate quite nicely with Muniz. And I think Brighton at home's an okay fixture game week 1. And then I've got Marcus Rashford in. First time I've really considered him. Bruno Fernandes is better, right? Especially with penalties, guaranteed minutes, etc. He's 1.5 million more. I don't have that money with the squad setup that I've gone for. I do think it's likely that a 6.5, so saving 0.5 million, is just as good as Rashford. But it's maybe not that guarantee right now. And I think, look, I don't watch a huge amount of pre-season games, if I'm honest, but the reports coming out from Man United are that Rashford's looking pretty sharp. He had a terrible season last year, and it could be another repeat of that. But he's come down in price, so he's better value. And we know there's a player that's capable of doing more if he gets the game time. If he's playing on the left permanently, and it's Amad Diallo or Garnacho that goes and plays on the right, then Rashford could be in for a good season. My main worry is, one, that he was terrible last year, but also Man United were just bad in general. And I'm not sure Man United are going to hit the ground running. You know, Yoro's already out. Xerxes hasn't been training a huge amount. Højlund's out as well. It's going to be a bit of a makeshift front three either way. It could be that Rashford plays through the middle, but I don't think that's going to happen. Like, Sancho has been touted as well. So there's already a bit of, uncertainty about how Man United are going to play. And I just feel like, can I put myself through that again? Like, I had Fernandes and Rashford in my Game Week 1 team last year. Went terribly, but that was 2 of them. And they were much more expensive. So Rashford's basically in because he's 7 million. I could just go down to a different 6.5, but I want to watch the Community Shield first. If Garnacho starts the Community Shield or gets really good minutes, I think he's going to start in Game Week 1. And I'd probably just switch to him instead, or just go for, again, a Brennan Johnson, Gibbs White, someone like that. I don't know. I feel like when I look at the rest of the squad right now, I feel like most of those picks are pretty solid, right? You can argue you've got preferences instead. That's absolutely fine, right? It's a game of opinions, and it could be McNeil instead of someone else. But Rashford's the only one there that I would consider like a bit of a punt. To be honest, I think the rest, I wouldn't consider the rest of the players punts. Like, again, McNeil could be a different 5.5, but Eze, Son and Kunku, Mikalenko, Trent, Porro, Flecken, they're just all pretty solid picks. So if Rashford goes wrong, that's only one player to deal with. And if a 6.5 million midfielder or below emerges, like it could be Szoboszlai, right? Again, not a player that I've not mentioned a huge amount, then you can just transfer Rashford down to one of them because he's 7, he's more expensive. So, I don't know, maybe I'm trying to talk myself into it too much, but I'm kind of looking forward to watching the Community Shield and see how he does. And if he looks sharp, I think Man United's fixtures are pretty nice to start the season from an attacking point of view. Like, Fulham at home, Game Week 1, then Brighton away. Liverpool at home, not as good, but Southampton away, so a newly promoted side. Palace away. I just think Rashford's going to get pretty good minutes. If there's any doubts around that from the Community Shield, I just won't go there. I won't take that risk. I'll just put a 6.5 in instead and bank the 0.5 million for a rainy day. Maybe upgrade Porro to someone else. But I don't know. Today, maybe it's not like I'm hungover or anything. But Rashford just came into my thinking, so I stuck him in. But it could just be another 6.5 instead. Don't get too hung up on the fact Rashford is in. Think more about the overall squad structure, which I think looks okay. And then up front, I've already mentioned Rodrigo Muniz, who's on the bench for Game Week 1, but has good fixtures after that. If we just take a quick look at what Fulham have got, it's Leicester at home in Game Week 2, Ipswich away in Game Week 3. So 2 of the newly promoted sides within the first 3 game weeks. Then back-to-back home games against West Ham and Newcastle, Forest away. After that, it gets a little bit trickier. But in terms of the opening stages of the season, Muniz looks pretty decent. And obviously, I wouldn't have to necessarily play him every week because I've got that 5.5 million midfielder who could be used as part of a rotation, etc. as well. And then the other 2 forwards are Haaland and Isak. I know like a few videos ago I mentioned that Pep said Haaland had a few niggles. That's why he didn't play the second half in one of their pre-season games. And then he goes and starts against Chelsea in pre-season, scores a hat-trick. And I've just not really got any doubts about him. Again, we will see the Man City versus Man United Community Shield game. If Haaland starts and gets close to 90 minutes and looks good, and there's no issues and Pep doesn't put any doubts about fitness, I'm still pretty sure I'm going to start with him. I do think that the overall squad with just Salah instead of Haaland looks good, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But I need to be realistic. I don't think I can go through Game Week 2 without captaining Haaland against Ipswich. And I think in Game Week 1, I'm actually more than happy to captain Isak, who's the third forward against Southampton at home. Like, even if I went without Haaland and had Salah, okay, I can captain Salah against Ipswich away Game Week 1. It could be a monster score, but so could Isak against Southampton. And he is, at this point, locked in for me. I think him and Eze have been in pretty much every single draft that I've drawn up. So overall, I think that looks pretty decent. Over on the My Team's one on Fantasy Football Hub, comes out at the 91% team rating. As always, if you want to check how your draft is looking, completely free to get your rating. You just have to upload a screenshot of your team. It's as simple as that. It takes seconds. And if we look at the rotation for the defenders, for example, with Porro, so in Game Week 2, it's Trent against Brentford at home, Pedro Porro against Everton at home. Mykolenko comes out for Robinson against Leicester. I'll just save that. Then in Game Week 3, I'd probably always play Trent against Man United away. Like, there's not many games I'm going to rest him for. If I want to take Pedro Porro out, I can for Mykolenko, and I can play Robinson against Ipswich away. But I think by the time we get to Game Week 3, if I've got Porro, I would just probably play him. I'd probably bench him against Arsenal. So then I've got Trent against Forest, Robinson against West Ham, and I can bring in Konza against Everton at home instead of Mykolenko against Villa away. And it just goes... It just looks pretty good. The defence with that extra 4.5 instead of the 4 million defender works really nicely. And it's similar with the attackers. McNeil starts Game Week 1, but in Game Week 2 against Spurs away, he just comes out, sits on the bench, and you've got Muniz against Leicester at home. So I actually think it works pretty well. And looking at the squad overall, I'm not sure... Like, trying to think about who I'm missing. Of course I'm missing Salah, right? But you've got to make a lot of sacrifices to get him in, as I'll show in a minute. There's not any other major play, like of course Palmer or Saka, but I'm only realistically going to have one of those premium midfielders. I've got Trent, I've got Porro, no Vardio, no Arsenal defender, but I'm willing to back against Arsenal in particular. So overall, I just think it looks pretty solid. So again, if you want to check your team out, links in the description below. Let's take a look at the other couple of drafts. So this is my Salah only draft, and I'm pretty confident still that by the time we get to the Game Week 1 deadline, it'll either be Salah or Haaland for me, and not both. Although I do have a draft with both in, which I'll show you in a second. I just think the overall squad balance works better if you just have one of those two premium players. And with Salah, you obviously make a saving of 2.5 million over Haaland. You can spread that around pretty nicely. So Flecken's still in goal. In defence, I've still got Trent and Porro, but instead of Mykolenko and Robinson, I've got Van Dijk and Barco. So sacrificing a 4.5 million defender for a 4 million one, and obviously swapping Haaland for Salah lets me get Van Dijk instead of Mykolenko. So double up on the Liverpool defence looks pretty nice along with Porro. And then in midfield, it's still Nkunku, Son and Eze. That will probably be Saka instead of Son, as I've already mentioned. Then I've got Salah, of course, and then Bruno Fernandes instead of Rashford. And I've said this before, players like Fernandes and Odegaard are not exciting. And 8.5 million does feel, in some ways, a little bit expensive for what they offer versus those value players that will definitely come up this season. But also, Fernandes is like a hassle-free player. He's always going to play, never going to give you any issues. And if you want to build a squad where you've got a better chance of saving transfers and having to take less hits and stuff like that, players like Fernandes are kind of perfect. So if I went for Salah, I'd probably try and... Or I would have the money to put Fernandes in. Still got Isak and Muniz up front. And then on the bench, it's Armstrong. So 5.5 million forward from Southampton on penalties, and just gives you that rotation option, gives you a slightly deeper squad, better bench, etc. For what it's worth, if João Pedro plays in the final pre-season friendly for Brighton, he's fit for Game Week 1, it'll probably be him instead. But for now, I've just gone for Armstrong because I'm pretty confident that he's going to play. So I really think that looks good. I just don't know if I can get past the fact that Haaland plays Ipswich in Game Week 2. I just think overall the squad is just a slightly bit better. And the value for cheap attackers is definitely in the forward line rather than midfielders. So by having like a Salah and a João Pedro or a Salah and an Armstrong, that's probably better than Haaland and McNeil or Andreas Pereira or someone like that. And you get more money to spread around as well. And the thing that I didn't need to see is when I put this into the My Team tool, it comes out at a 96% rating, so even higher. It's just an overall, in my opinion at least, such a good squad. There's very few downsides. I'd really love to be able to upgrade Barco to a 4.5 million defender, but there's not a great way to save 0.5. Like, I could do Fernandes down to Rashford again, or Gordon, or maybe a Liverpool midfielder if one of them looks nailed. But I don't know. I think I'd probably just rather go for Barco on the bench. For what it's worth, if Darwin looks like he's going to start for Liverpool in game week 1, or Solanke goes to Spurs, or maybe even if Solanke remains at Bournemouth, I'd be a little bit tempted to switch the money from Fernandes to one of them up front, and then just do Armstrong to Darwin or Solanke, whoever it might be, and then just do Fernandes down to a cheaper midfielder, like a 6.5. That would work too, right? Because Fernandes is 8.5, and Darwin and Solanke are 7.5, so you'd save $1 million. And then instead of Armstrong, you can have a 6.5 million midfielder. Either way, I'm probably making it confusing now. But 96% rating just looks really good. And it's not like Salah, Ipswich away and Brentford at home is bad captain options either. So that's the Salah draft. Let's look at getting both in. So although I'm likely to go with just one of Salah or Haaland, I do think it's viable to build a squad with both of them. There's probably a few too many sacrifices for my liking, but you can build a squad that's definitely not terrible, right? And I'm going to run through the one that I've got here. So Flecken's still in goal, Porro still in defence. Instead of Trent Alexander-Arnold, I've gone for Virgil van Dijk. I just felt like I needed to spend that money in attack instead. There are ways to get Trent in, which I'll come on to in a minute, but none of them I particularly like. I've gone back to the Mikalenko and Robinson rotating 4.5 million defenders. No money to go from Barco to Konza, so instead I've got a £4 million defender on the bench too. Their midfield is Nkunku, Brennan Johnson. That could be a different 6.5 like Gibbs White or Garnacho, but Johnson's who I've gone for right now. If it looks like Spurs are going to buy a new winger, or they're in the market for one, that might put me off a little bit. And even if Solanke comes in, by the way, and you've got Son on the left, Solanke through the middle, suddenly there's a bit more competition for those wide spots as well. There's just one less position for them all to play in, because Solanke will take up a lot of minutes. So Johnson's not a lot, but for this purposes, he's in. Eze, Salah. Then I've got Andreas Pereira instead of McNeil, because I don't have Muniz up front. And if Andreas is going to play every game and be on penalties, he's not a bad option. And then I've got 5.5 million forward on the bench in Armstrong, which could be João Pedro. I did originally have a 4.5 million forward and then a 6.5 million midfielder. But I do quite like having a strong bench if I can, and a deeper squad. So that's why I've gone for the two 5.5s. But obviously you could keep playing around with this right up until the deadline. And then I've got Haaland and Isak. So I certainly don't think it's terrible. Instead of Armstrong, I could go to a 4.5 million forward and do Van Dijk to Trent and just play Andreas every single week. But that leaves me with Robinson, Barco, and a non-playing forward on the bench. I just feel like anytime something happens to your 11, you're forced into a transfer straight away. Or if they've got a bad fixture, you've just got to play them, because you've got no support on the bench apart from Robinson, really. And he's mostly rotating with Mikalenko. I mean, it could be that Barco ends up being amazing, right? He keeps that left-back spot. Even when Estepinian's back, he's super attacking. It's not a guarantee, though. And also, the fixtures aren't that great for Brighton until game weeks 4 and 5. So I like it. I'm just not sure I like it as much as the single premium draft. So either Salah only or Haaland only. But again, it comes out quite well in the My Team tool, 94%. In fact, I think the Salah and Haaland draft and the Salah only one came out better than my Haaland only one, but maybe that's because I got Rashford in that one. So I think it's all viable. I mean, ultimately, I'm going to end up going with something that I'm happy with. There's going to be a lot of noise about the players I should pick. It's got to be a team that I'm comfortable managing for the first few weeks, that I'm not going to regret straight away and force myself into an early wildcard. There's lots of different ways to play it. I'm going to keep playing around with all three of those variations, because by the time we get to the deadline, I might have a sudden change of mind and I want to be able to just put a team together quickly. But right now, if I was choosing my team and the deadline was tomorrow, it'd probably be Haaland only. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Leave a like if you're on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. Rate 5 stars if you've enjoyed that and you're on podcast. And obviously check out the My Team tool over on Fantasy Football Hub. Get your draft rated for free using the links in the description below, and 50% off if you want to sign up and use all their other tools that they have as well. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you again tomorrow.